What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Meko, joined by my guy Morgan here. And Morgan, we are officially on to Tampa Bay this week, getting ready for Lions versus Tampa in the divisional rounds of the 2023 NFL playoff. First and foremost, what are your thoughts about the Lions pulling Tampa Bay again? They've already played them once earlier in week 6, but what do you think about this matchup overall?
Miko, the cliches are there, right? Like, it's tough to beat anyone twice. This, that, and the other. There's, a lot of football cliches stuffed into
Yeah.
in there. But at the end of the day, the Bucs have played better as of late. But still pretty excited for this matchup. I was honestly feeling pretty good either way, whether it was the Bucs or Philly coming here. So, any given Sunday, if the Lions don't come ready, they can certainly lose this game against the Bucs, and that'll be the season. But if they take care of business, which we're going to get into in the next couple videos here, highlighting the Bucs, they should be able to move on to the NFC Championship game, which is incredibly exciting.
I'm right there with you, man. And so last week when we were looking at the Rams, we started with the Rams offense, kind of breaking them down and explaining what made them such an issue, or could be an issue for the Lions defense. This week I actually want to do the opposite, because me personally, Morgan, when I look at this Tampa Bay team, no disrespect to Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, or Chris Godwin, or any of those guys on the offense, but this defense is still the unit for me that gives me the most pause when it comes down to, hey, the Lions may struggle a bit trying to figure this group out. And as we're gonna go through in the film, like it's on multiple levels, right? Like it's not just one guy or one position group. This Tampa Bay defense is kind of stacked from head to from top to bottom. There it is.
Yeah, like they're a really good unit. They're not. I wouldn't put them in the elite category, like in terms of like all their metrics, but they are really, really elite at a few things, and they're really strong up the spine, right? Like they have Vita Vea. Obviously, everyone knows who that is. And that's who is a big part of having. It makes it difficult to run against the Bucs because Vita Vea's in there, but they also have Kalijah Cansey coming on strong. Yaya Diaby, Shaq Barrett, both really productive edge rushers this year. And their interior is going to prove challenging, right? Because it's strength on strength here. Because again, they're really good at stopping the run. I believe they're 8th in terms of run defensive DVOA. And the Lions are going to have to execute and be really physical. I felt like they were physical early on against the Rams. They were moving the line of scrimmage and kind of caving things in. I would love to see some of that against the Bucs right away, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, again, we can kind of get into the film here a little bit, but in watching some of the games back that I watched, this group is tough. They are absolutely stout up the middle. But at the same time, there are plenty of plays where they do kind of give up yardage here or there. Not so much on this play, though, because this is where we see that group that you're talking about with Vita Vea, Logan Hall, Kalijah Cansey. Like, these guys do a really good job of walling off the running back and kind of forcing them to stop their feet so that their linebackers can make those plays in the backfield.
Yeah, and that's part of their scheme too, right? Like the 3-4 they run. So you're asking Vita Vea to 2-gap, and you're asking other defensive linemen to 2-gap, and in doing so, if that's clean, then you're going to allow linebackers to run free, which is what Levante David has done on this defense for so long. And now you're seeing KJ Britt do it, number 52, who gets a really good run fill here. So I like Britt, especially when he gets he pops when you watch him when he gets going downhill. And Miko, to your point, this is why they're good against the run, is because they're sound up front. They occupy their blocks and occupy their gaps, and they get downhill and fill.
Yeah, and the thing that I love so much about this play, that's number 94, Kalijah Cansey, right there in the middle. That's kind of splitting the center and the guard here. And if those that remember the draft process, Kalijah Cansey was kind of looked at like people weren't sure what kind of run defender he was going to be. But when you're playing next to a guy like Vita Vea, and having Logan Hall on the other side of you, there gives you a lot more opportunities to kind of utilize the athleticism you have. So maybe he's not the best at anchoring like a Vita Vea is, but he's able to use his athleticism and his, quickness to basically take two guys out of the play, which really allows KJ Britt to kind of clean up afterwards.
Yeah, Miko. And he does a good job of just kind of creating mayhem, right? Like, he's off his feet, which you typically don't want to do, but he occupies two blockers in doing so, and sometimes that's all it takes in terms of in this scheme for your linebackers to get downhill and get the ball carrier on the ground. So yeah, I like Cansey. At 6'1", 280 is what he's listed at, I believe. He's not the biggest interior defensive lineman, but shoot, the Lions just played a smaller defensive lineman by the name of Aaron Donald last week, and he's been doing it at a really high level for a long time. So yeah, Cansey's really coming on strong. And again, I like this though, because where the Bucs are strong, the Lions are strong, right? Like
Hmm.
Cansey and Vita Vea, they're going to have to go against the likes of second team All Pro Frank Ragnow, uh, Jonah Jackson, who's coming off of a monster game, Graham Glasgow, who's playing, his best football perhaps of his career. So I like that matchup, but yeah, this is definitely a strength of the Bucs, and really they're strong all the way up through the spine of that defense because you have the difference makers we just talked about on the defensive line. You have Levante David and KJ Britt at linebacker, and then you have, we're going to get into him later, but Antoine Winfield Jr., who's a
Yeah.
first team All Pro at safety, and is just a turnover machine back there for Tampa.
Yeah, it's a really, like I said, that's why I kind of say like this entire defense, maybe like you said, isn't full of all pros, but it's solid from top to bottom. A lot of these guys complement each other's play style really well. And when looking at the run defense, again, that's why Tampa's run defense is so good. They've allowed, they're in the top 10 when it comes down to, fewest amount of, rushing yards allowed or average yards per carry. They're one of those top teams for a reason. But I don't think that should take away from the fact of how good they are when it comes down to rushing the passer either, because they're so sound up front and even at the linebacker level, they don't really have to blitz all that often, Morgan. Sometimes they're able to just create pressure with that front four.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what Todd Bowles and his staff rely on in Tampa is that front four creating mayhem, generating a pass rush with only 4 or 5, and then they can commit more bodies to trying to stop the pass, which has been admittedly tougher for them, similar to the Lions defense. They're definitely better at stopping the run than they are at stopping the pass. But here, yeah, you'll just see this is a Cansey, I believe, right, Meko? This is the
Yeah.
Cansey play. Yeah, and this is just active hands, miscommunication from Green Bay, and ends up being an incomplete. They're lucky that was just incomplete. That thing kind of fluttered out of there, didn't it?
Yeah, and this the thing that I love so much about this play is like Green Bay's kind of trying to keep extra, bodies in here. They're trying to move guys around on the offensive line to be able to pick up, you know, the potential of a blitz coming. But again, Kalijah Cansey does exactly what you said. He keeps his hands active, he keeps his eyes in the backfield, and just navigates his way to Jordan Love. And it doesn't result in a sack, but it is an incompletion, and they're one step closer to getting off the field.
Yeah, and these plays, like we looked at for our top plays in the win against the Rams, these are the plays that a lot of time make a difference, man. Just forcing an incompletion, forcing an errant pass that gets you off the field. So, yeah, Cansey's definitely like he's one of those interior defensive linemen that's 100% capable of winning a one-on-one rep, even against a really good offensive lineman like Ragnow, Glasgow, Jonah, etc. But where he can step up to and reset his feet to get off his spot. So yeah, Cansey's one. Yeah, it's paramount for the Lions to have another really good game from their offensive line this week. They do that and they suppress some of this, the all the trouble that Tampa Bay is able to cause both against the run and against the pass. Then they'll be in good shape.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really, at least for me, gives me more concern this week than last week. Last week when we were talking about the Rams, we spent a lot of time talking about their defensive line, specifically talking about Kobe Turner, talking about Aaron Donald, talking about Byron Young, and we talked a lot about their secondary, but we didn't talk a ton about their linebacker core, Morgan. And you've already said it a couple times here: Levante David, KJ Britt, even Devin White. I know, like his play sometimes goes up and down a little bit, but they have a solid core of linebackers that are not just smart or experienced, but they're athletic too. So things that maybe take other linebackers a little bit longer to process and fire on, these guys do very quickly.
Yeah, and I'm sure it all stems with and begins with Levante David. He's been doing it for so long. He's been one of the best off-ball linebackers in football for a very long time. So yeah, I'm sure it's really nice for them to learn from a guy like that, just because who better to learn from? But yeah, sideline to sideline. covering tight ends and backs out of the backfield. Lavonte David can do it all, and he shows you why he's still one of the, the best linebackers in football. And here, this is just a really good blitz, man. Just immediately does a good job of disguising it pre-snap, right? Like he acts like he's moving with the tight end who is in motion, and Lawrence never really takes an account for him, and he gets whacked.
Yeah, and so the thing that stood out to me, Morgan, I mean, again, as somebody who played linebacker, for me, what this looked like is a switch of responsibilities, right? So KJ Britt looks like he was originally, manned up with 85 here on the motion, and he communicates to David like, "Hey, he's coming to your side, so you're responsible for picking him up now." But because 85 comes up to block, this is where I say like this is not just athleticism, but like really like showcasing smarts as well. Because Devontae Davis doesn't waste any time. The minute he sees 85 set up to block, he's out of the cannon. He's going right at Lawrence in the backfield.
Yeah, it really does look like he shot out of a cannon. I know, that's something said all the time, but he shoots this gap so fast, and yeah, he's on top of Lawrence in a minute. And to Lavonte David's credit, two other Bucs were there at the same time, so this just looked like a complete breakdown on the part of Jacksonville in terms of pass pro. But yeah, and like you said, Todd Bowles he'll mix it up. He will send pressure with linebackers and DBs, but when he does, these are the ones that can get home and can change a game, because a sack here is bad. It's probably going to be a drive killer, but you don't want to have this turn into something where you're giving the ball away, right, Meko?
No, absolutely not. And again, that's at least the one thing that Trevor Lawrence is able to do here is he's able to at least protect the football in this situation against a Bucs team that is very good at creating turnovers. But this is I almost look at this play similar to what you were saying earlier about, when it comes to the defensive line, pressure up the middle is some of the worst pressure to get. Lavonte David doesn't come completely up the middle, but it's not too far off to the side where it's immediate pressure right into the lap of the quarterback.
Yeah, and he had nowhere to go, right? Even because those other two guys also won their reps and met at the quarterback, there was nowhere really for Lawrence to reset his feet or to run at all. So yeah, this is just one of those. And Lavonte David, I hope he got credited with the whole sack here. It's always funny to hear defenders talk about, they're arguing like, oh, you got credited for half a sack, that was my whole sack. And so
Yep.
it's always funny to listen to that. But yeah, I really hope, because the Lions did such a great job against the Rams at keeping Jared Goff relatively clean. I really hope they can repeat that against Tampa Bay, because, again, that would go a long way in terms of just protecting the ball and imposing your will on offense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one other thing I wanted to point out. When talking about the defensive line and talking about the linebackers, Tampa Bay has 6 players, Morgan, that have at least 4 sacks or more on the season, with Yaya Diaby basically leading them with 7.5. So like they have a lot of guys that can get after you, whether it's on the defensive line or at that linebacker position. So kind of like you're saying, the Lions are really going to have to rely on that offensive line to communicate well and be on the same page of understanding where pressure is going to come from if they expect to keep Jared Goff clean for an entire game.
Yeah, you'd love to see what you saw against the Rams, because there was times where they had Aaron Donald and Kobe Turner and so on and so forth running stunts and games, and they seem to always have Aaron Donald accounted for, which was really nice to see. The fact that he's just not, wrecking things in your backfield. And Dan Campbell talked about that at the half. So I'm sure it's going to be a little bit nicer coming from, no disrespect to Kalijah Cansey or Vita Vea, but going from Aaron Donald to this group of interior, Aaron Donald and Kobe Turner, excuse me, it's almost like, okay, we just dealt with the potentially the greatest defensive tackle to ever live. I think we can handle this now, or at least that's what I hope in my head.
Yeah, no, you're right. That should be a confidence builder in some aspect, right? It wasn't like you just went against, some B tier group of pass rushers. You went against some of the better pass rushers. Aaron Donald had 8 sacks on the season. Kobe Turner had 9 or 9.5. So like you were going against some high quality interior pass rushers. Now you're just having to prove it again against another group. And sure, they can blitz you from a number of different areas, but this is a group that is very much battle tested. And if you can keep Jared Goff clean, you're much more likely to see him operate in the same fashion that he did last week. But there's one little caveat to this game, Morgan, and that's when we start to talk about the Bucs' ability to create turnovers, and you mentioned him early in Antoine Winfield Jr., he's an all-pro for a reason, right?
Yeah, and his production speaks for itself. You can see him. He's often the guy back there in Tampa getting the defense set pre-snap, communicating things on the back end, making plays near the line of scrimmage. He's awesome in coverage. He's really, really awesome in zone. He's a do-it-all, true, multifaceted safety. And what did we said? He had was responsible for 9 turnovers of his own during the
Yeah,
regular season, right? So that's
yeah.
you're a
Three
ball hawk.
interceptions, 3 interceptions, 6 forced fumbles. Like you said, he plays everywhere on this defense. He's covering the deep half of the football field. He'll play in the box. He'll hit you. He's, like you said, he can create turnovers if the ball's overthrown, like it is in this situation from Trevor Lawrence. He's a guy that, again, Jared Goff and his offense is going to have to be mindful of because he's a true chess piece for this defense. He can literally be wherever they need him to be and match up with whoever to be able to cause issues for the opposing offense.
Yeah, and to your point too, post snap, like I hope it's a talking point during the week that when you're around him, you got to cover that ball up, man. Like you can't allow him to have an opportunity to punch at the ball or try to get it out, get a hat on the ball, and force a takeaway, because that's one of the ways the Lions, in my opinion, could lose this game against Tampa is if they do put the ball on the ground or turn it over too many times and give the Bucs short fields and things of that nature. So yeah, I got to be aware of where he is, to your point. And if he's playing really far away from the line of scrimmage, I think that's for the best. If the Lions can threaten the Bucs vertically enough to where they don't feel comfortable bringing their all-pro down into the box all the time, I think that'll pay dividends and make it a little bit easier for the Lions ground game to get going.
Well, and that's a really good point that you make there, because I think that is where, if we're, spent a good amount of time talking about a lot of the things that the Bucs are good at, right? They're great in the trenches with their defensive line, both defending the run and rushing the passer. They're great on the next level with their linebackers. They're, like you said, they play sideline to sideline. They're able to get into the backfield if it's on blitzes, or even just recognizing that, they have the go ahead in case of an extra blocker staying back there. And then they're very solid in coverage with a lot of quality players. Antoine Winfield Jr., Jamel Dean, Carlton Davis III. They're really good in the secondary. So why are they not, or why are they only, why do they finish the season 9-8? And when I start to look at this defense, Morgan, personally, I think it has a lot to do with scheme. And those of you that watched our film breakdown of the Rams last week, you're going to hear something that's fairly familiar, because Tampa plays a very similar style of coverage a lot of times in games. And I think this is the type of stuff that really cost them throughout the season and probably gave them some losses that they probably shouldn't have had, just because they weren't able to play a more aggressive style of defense and coverage.
Yeah, and part of it's their complementary football, and for a while I know their offense had issues getting going, and putting points on the board. But yeah, I think some of it's personnel, right, in terms of their defense.
Mm-hmm.
Jamel Dean's a good player. They have the rookie out of Rutgers, Christian Azian. I hope I'm saying that right, Azian, at the nickel, and then Carlton Davis, who actually had a good game against the Eagles the other day. But yeah, this is it's definitely a spot where the Lions can take advantage. Because if you think back, their Week 6 game that they beat the Bucs, they didn't have Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery healthy for that game. And it was the only game of the year where they essentially abandoned the run. They just didn't even attempt it. And they threw the ball all over the yard against the Bucs, and that was it. That was the first game that JMO was really implemented in the offense, and still then it was just like the deep shot.
Yeah.
A couple others. So yeah, and then I'm sure they're playing better football, but then at the end of the day, I would say the Lions offense is playing better football than they were at that point of the season too. So yeah, it's definitely a spot where I think the Lions can take advantage in terms of throwing the ball around the yard a little bit.
Yeah, especially in situations like this where, like we're saying, they're playing really far off in coverage here, right? Like Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis are at least a good 10 yards off the ball. and you're giving these wide receivers a lot of space to operate. Now, granted, this is a nickel blitz, and Devonta Smith is able to run, this really nice slant route. Jalen Hurts is able to get it to him quickly. This is the type of stuff that could get the Bucs burned if you're trying to do this stuff against an Amon-Ra St. Brown or even a Josh Reynolds who really carved up the Rams on some of these shorter routes and turning them into bigger plays just from catching it short.
Yeah, Meko, and to your point, this could be an opportunity for a lot of run after catch because, as you know, Devonta Smith right here on a post or a slant, you're taught to catch the ball, get upfield, and split the safeties.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is Jameson Williams, man, this might be a house call because there's just so much room, and he could hit that extra gear and be just see ya. And we've seen all the damage Saint can do after the run, even if he's not as straight line fast as JMO. He's dynamic with the ball in his hands. He's tough. He breaks tackles. So yeah, both shots. I mean, and this was the game. We said it earlier. This is the game that Jared Goff connected with JMO on that really, that beautiful deep ball where the Lions needed it, to be honest, in order to put that game away. And yeah, you could see some more of that too. If this is a game, they're good. They're stout against the run, right? So you want to stretch them out both vertically and horizontally and make it a little bit easier potentially for Jameer and for David Montgomery to get going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point earlier, you were making a really good point about saying part of this may be due to personnel and probably just a philosophy, right? I think Tampa has a lot of faith in their linebackers. They have a lot of faith in their defensive line to be able to create pressure. So they feel like they can allow their cornerbacks to be, more reactive in the passing game because they tackle really well as another point. So again, there's nothing wrong in their minds probably with giving up, a 5-yard reception if they feel like their corners can get there and they can rally and make tackles. The problem is when these are not 5-yard routes, when they're deeper routes and you're already giving up a lot of coverage and you're continuing to retreat, these receivers are just running routes underneath that coverage and finding the soft spots in the zone. And once again, giving up really big plays.
Yeah, this must be like a 3rd and long or something. But yeah, even then they're playing incredibly soft coverage and so many people are away from the line of scrimmage. And yeah, you make it really easy, right? Like almost what the Rams were doing with Josh Reynolds, and he was just kind of running uncontested through the middle of the field. And we know the Lions love these in breakers, right? And Jared Goff loves to throw them these in breakers that end up between the hashes or around that area. Because that's the Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Reynolds, Sam Laporta area where they're carving you up and getting you for chunks at a time. So yeah, and again, if they want to cheat down and start trying to take some of this away, I think that opens you up to trying a couple deep shots to JMO or to Saint or to whoever if Khalif's healthy this week. But yeah, this is something that they can definitely take advantage of, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, because the Lions have so many different weapons that they can utilize in this type of concept. Like you said, you mentioned St. Brown, you mentioned JMO, who's gotten so much better at recognizing zone coverage and recognizing when to sit down on certain routes. Josh Reynolds absolutely eats on these types of routes. And then we have Sam Laporta as well. There are just so many weapons that this Bucs defense is going to have to contend with. I'm almost willing to bet, Morgan, that we won't see too much of stuff like this because they're going to know that hey, when the Lions get into 3rd and long situations, if they get into them, we can't just expect us to be soft in coverage. They have enough weapons to pick up a 3rd and long, especially if Jared Goff has time to operate.
Yeah, because he's like we saw against the Rams, he was snapping through his progressions at a pretty good clip and making good decisions and just taking care of the football and getting it to where it needed to go. So I expect more of that. And again, to your point, they were the way they play soft coverage and allow guys to get free releases off the line of scrimmage. That's tough against the Lions because, like you said, they have a lot of guys who really understand what to do against zone, how to find the soft spot. And what's given the Lions trouble this year is when teams can play really sticky. I mean, it gives everyone trouble, but really sticky man coverage. And that's tougher, and that's been the games like Baltimore and things like that. So yeah, these teams that are just going to sit in like a passive zone, I don't like the odds of slowing down the Lions offense just because, like you said, it's going to be difficult to consistently make those plays when the Lions have so many guys that are so dynamic with the ball in their hand.
Yeah, I would not advise any team in the playoffs at this point to allow Jared Goff to get into a rhythm. If you're going to allow him to sit back and deal with off coverage zone and allow his receivers to run their routes, it may not come out quickly, but he's eventually going to find somebody open because someone's going to find the soft spot in the zone, and Jared Goff is eventually going to get to his progression and get the ball to that person. But at the end of the day, Morgan, I think the number one thing that this Lions team is going to want to do and probably even need to do is run the ball. And I know at the beginning of this video we talked about like, listen, the Bucs have a really stout run defense. But just because it's stout doesn't mean it's perfect. Doesn't mean that they're not susceptible to certain types of run plays and that you can't run on them. And I think this play that we're about to look at from Green Bay is a really good example of that. They did, in fact, like if you look at the stat sheet, they held Green Bay in check for the entirety of that game. But the way that game started, Green Bay kind of had Tampa's number when it came down to the ground attack.
Yeah, and as we know, the Packers can run the ball when they have things going well for them. Aaron Jones is still a really good back in this league, and that offensive line has gotten better as the years wore on in terms of run blocking. So yeah, and we were talking about this earlier, but this is certainly a concept the Lions could use and will probably use against Tampa Bay, and it involves getting their athletic offensive line moving and into space. So in that instance, you saw the center pull there, and certainly something Frank Ragnow is capable of, as we've seen a bunch of times. And for Penei Sewell, right, like this is where the
8 carries for Aaron Jones, 44 yards. Like you give the Lions that if you see David Montgomery get that type of yardage or Jahmyr Gibbs, you at best believe Ben Johnson's probably going to be stepping on the gas with those two guys to continue to put pressure on Tampa's defense. Again, that doesn't mean that they're not good at defending the run, but if Ben Johnson can find a formula against this run defense, there are plenty of plays and plenty of teams who have done it. Like I said, they have absolutely been good against the run, but they still have 8 games on the season where they gave up 100 yards rushing. So again, there are definitely some cracks in that armor if you can find them.
Yeah, it's not impenetrable. And because the Lions are able to run the ball in such a variety of different ways, zone blocking, gap schemes, excuse me. So they're able to do it in so many different ways. And I do think it'll be a point of emphasis coming out. Like, yes, you guys are good against the run. Yes, you have some really, strong players up the middle of your defense, especially in the front seven and Antoine Winfield Jr. But we think we're the best offensive line in football. We think we have the best running back duo in football, and you're about to find out why we think that. So I think that's going to end up being their mindset going into the game.
Yeah, and I said to you before we started recording, I think this game can go one of two ways, and I'm sure this is going to make Bucs fans annoyed and probably have them typing angrily in the comment section. But personally, looking at this defense, and we're going to get into the offense in the next video, but looking at this defense, I do think this game goes one of two ways. I think either the Lions are able to figure out, Tampa's defense, build on what they were able to do in their first matchup, and get out to a really comfortable lead, and Tampa may struggle to kind of keep pace with the Lions being able to go up and down the field and putting up points. Or I think this could be very reminiscent of, I'm a real big fan of the AFC North back in the day when like the Steelers and the Ravens used to play each other in that rivalry when both had really good defenses, where this is just like a straight up, fist fight for the majority of this game between two really sound run defenses. And you're just waiting for one of these passing attacks to kind of, get underway at some point.
Yeah, Meko, and I want to say, the Lions really need to. We're going to get into the offense next video, but if the Lions make them earn it, right? Like, Mayfield has played better as of late, but there's still a lot of turnover-worthy balls he throws. So yeah, I would like to see them limit some of the big plays they've been allowing lately over the last few weeks, and make this offense earn it. And then on the other side, like we just covered, take advantage of some of the personnel advantages that you have on against the Bucs defense and exploit those, man. Lean on your strengths. That's what's cool about the playoffs as you get closer, right? Because yes, you want to preserve players, but at the most you only have 3 more games left, and one of them you have a 2-week break in between. So if so If you want to give Jahmyr Gibbs 27 touches because he's eating, do it. If you want to give Monty 28 touches because he's beating up a defense and only getting stronger in the second half, do it. It's like a little bit of that burn the boats mentality, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I love so much about this coaching staff in particular is that, we heard it from Dan Campbell last year in Hard Knocks. They're one of those teams that are willing to play that gritty, tough physical game to the point where it may come down to a fourth quarter and they just believe that they're tough enough and they're the tougher team that they can just pull out a win at the end. And again, I can't say enough good things about this Bucs defense, but again, if you give the Lions those opportunities to kind of build momentum or just continue to basically, body shot your defense, for four quarters, this offense, speaking of the Lions, is talented enough. They're eventually going to, get through and they're going to start getting into the end zone. Maybe it'll be early, maybe it'll be late, but as good as this defense is, I do think they can be worn down over the course of four quarters.
Yeah, and if you want evidence of that, look no further than the first half of the last week's game, right? Like the Lions, 3 straight drives scored touchdowns, just boom, boom, boom. And it was, if you're the Rams, you're like, we are on skates, man. We are getting pushed directly back. They're doing whatever they want against us, and that was a good defense coming into that game too. They had been playing really well as of late. So, yeah, at the end of the day, unless you have like a superstar-ridden like defense, the Lions' offense is going to have advantages, and if they're feeling themselves even in the slightest, if they're executing, they're going to take advantage.
Absolutely. So, with that said, we want to hear from you guys in the comment section below. What do you think the Lions have to worry about most when it comes to, this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense? If you're looking for like specific, breakdowns of some of the players, Morgan and I did that back in week 6 when the Lions were getting ready to play the Bucs. So go ahead and I'll have that video linked somewhere in this video that you can go ahead and click that and watch that and get a little more breakdown of, what Antoine Winfield does well, what, Vita Vea does really well, and some of their other pass rushers. But let us know in the comment section below. Do you think the Lions have an advantage, when going up against this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense? Is there anything that you're worried about? Let us know in the comment section below. Also, be sure to check out PrideDetroit.com. There's going to be plenty of articles going up the rest of this week detailing any news or any type of opinion pieces that may be coming out about this upcoming matchup. And last but not least, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, because like we just said, we're going to be uploading a breakdown of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense as well. So if you want to know what the Lions need to have to be worried about on the offensive side of the football, be sure to be stay tuned for that video as well. So with all that said, I'm Meko, he's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.